Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third series of Snout Scout, the dog family's Pawfect guide. I am Priyanka Patki. I'm the co founder of Snout Scout, the dog family, and the head trainer there. Today, the guest of honor is Josh Kirby. He is the secretary of decoys of PSA. He's been a police officer for the last 17 years. We've had the honor of meeting him the last year for the PSA trial, so he's really very, very loved in our country. So, welcome, Josh.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing good. It's a little early here. I know it's what 4:30 in the afternoon there. Is that right?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's we're just
Are
waking
you
up. The sun's just coming up in Texas.
so? Are you still half asleep, or you're okay?
No, I'm doing all right. I got my coffee, so we'll be all right. I'll be up.
Right, right. Okay. So let's start with the first few questions that I have for you, Josh. So generally,
Okay.
people say that a dog who's trained in protection work is a liability. So how much truth is there in this statement? Do you think they can be great pet dogs as well, or we have to really be careful?
Let's start with the liability part of it. I think when you train a dog to bite, um, you need to be aware that could happen, right? So the liability portion of it really falls on the handler or the owner of the dog. I think it's important that when you're doing bite training that there's also a level of obedience there. I know some people like what I would refer to as a junkyard dog. The type of dog you can put in a yard and whoever comes over the fence, the dog's going to bite no matter what. I'm not
Right,
really interested in a dog like that. To me, that type of dog probably is a little bit more of a liability.
right,
But generally, most of the dogs we're training, we're putting a high level of obedience
right,
with those dogs too. So those dogs are probably truly the ones that have obedience are less likely to bite than your regular house dog, your regular pet, because they understand when they can bite and the context of when they're biting. So I think that if you put the obedience and take the time to train the dog properly, there's probably less of a liability, but it's something that the owner needs to be aware of. I could equate it to owning a gun. In Texas, everyone owns a gun in Texas.
right,
But a gun can be a liability in the wrong hands. But
right.
it's also a wonderful tool for self-defense and home defense.
Absolutely. That's a good comparison. So you think they definitely do not run a risk for the kids and for the people, for older people in the house at all? Do we have to be
I
careful
can't
about
tell.
how they handle the dog?
I think there's not a blanket statement for that. It's going to fall back to the cliche in dog. It depends on the dog, right? So the type of dog that I want my kids to be around the dog. I want the dog to be around people that I invite to my house. I want the dog to be stable in those types of environments to where I'm not worried about the dog. So that's the type of dog that I would select, or the type of dog that I would train. Um, and I think that most people that I know, and the way we train here in Texas is that our dogs can do that. They can handle that type of environment, and that's not an issue at home. They can be great pets. I think the people that look at a dog as a liability all the time, bites, probably have an experience with what I referred to earlier as a junkyard type dog, to where the dog is just going to bite whoever it comes in contact with, and that's really not what we're doing. Especially with the sport training or police training. We really can't have a dog like that. There's just no level of obedience, and we want the dogs to be in our homes and around people. And even on the police side, take the dogs into schools to do demonstrations. They're around kids, they're around strangers in different environments. That's something we want from
Right.
our dogs. So they can be great pets.
Right. So given that you said that it really depends on the dog, so what is it that you generally look when you're selecting a pup for a sport prospect? And what are the things you look at while raising such a dog?
So selecting a puppy, that can be difficult because if most people, when they're selecting a puppy, that selection is happening at that 7 to 8 week mark. You're looking at the dog, you're looking for certain things. Well, there's only so much you can see with a puppy. Hopefully you're starting with some good genetics. you know the bloodlines of the dog. That's a great place to start. But when I selected my PSA dog, I got her at 8 weeks, and I was doing testing on her at 6 and 7 weeks. Obviously, I want to see, even at that age, I want to see some amount of prey drive to where that dog is going to chase a rag or whatever test I'm doing. That was there, but probably the things that I valued more when it came to selecting a puppy had more to do with how the puppy handled environmental situations at that age. Um, just things like going obstacle to get to food. I wanted to see that type of stuff from the puppy. I wanted to look at the group of puppies as a whole. See
Okay.
which puppy was the first to try something out that was new. So
Oh,
when I
okay.
remember I was actually there. I was there the first time that group of puppies was let outside for the first time. So I wanted to see which puppy, was more willing to go out into that environment, with confidence.
Nice.
So a
Okay.
lot of environmental tests for puppies obviously look different than environmental tests for dogs, but those first experiences for puppies are something that I think is really important to watch and to see. I
Okay.
had the advantage of being a very good friend with the breeder, so I was able to see a lot of that stuff as that litter
Right.
was getting older. Um, Aside from the environmentals, with the puppies, one of the things I personally really love to see is just what I would call engagement from the puppies. I'll just sit there and just kind of watch them walk around. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the puppy that will come and try and engage me, right? So I like
Right.
the engagement from the dogs. A lot of dogs will be off doing, they're doing dog stuff. They're sniffing stuff. They're
Absolutely.
exploring. That's all great, but I like it when a dog will come and engage me, and I look for that in puppies.
Right.
So that's just a few things I look for in puppies, and you know, puppies are hard because you don't really know that dog's going to be a year from now. You can
Right.
try and do your best guess, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
those are things I look for.
Right. Okay. We have a question in this connection.
Okay.
Prathamesh is asking, do puppies behave differently in a litter versus one taken out of the litter?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. A lot of the testing we do, we test the puppy individually, right? So when they're little, they've grown up. They've come out of the womb and they've spent time with their litter. Whenever we're doing a puppy testing, I think it's important to take that puppy by themselves, remove them from the litter, remove them from their litter mates, and see what that dog actually is. There's lots of dogs that will show great confidence when they're around the litter, and
Right.
then you remove them from the litter and they look lost. So that's a
Right.
great question, and that's something that I look for is what the puppy's going to do by themselves.
Right. Okay. Great. Prathamesh, I hope that helps. Okay. So coming back to the puppies now, just in case there is a puppy who's showing at 3 to 4 months, he is showing a lot of defense. So would you like to enhance it right away, or you would like to start the defense work much later, maybe at maturity?
Yeah. So if a dog is showing a lot of defense early, I'm probably gonna try and work the dog in prey a little bit more. I think the problem with defense is I think sometimes defense is misread. Where true defense is actually that's a good thing. I want to see defense in my dog. But a lot of people mistake what I would describe as nervousness and maybe even sometimes fear as defense. There's elements of that within defense, but I want a dog that when it's in defense, it still looks very confident. So an
Okay.
example of that would be we're doing some type of agitation work, and the dog is at the end of the line, um,
Hmm.
very, very, very aggressively barking, but very confident in that bark.
Right.
That's what I'm looking for defense, where I see dogs, and some will say, "Oh, the dog's very defensive," and the dog may be back tied, but the dog's actually not at the end of the line. It's kind of barking. It's showing its teeth. Like these are signs of defense, but there's also a lot of nervousness going on there. The dog's
Right.
not really strong.
Right.
So I think sometimes that's misinterpreted. As far as like showing the dog a lot of defense on the decoy side of it. That's not something I really want to do very much of at all. With puppies or young dogs, I want to keep building the dogs in prey and making them feel confident. Slowly adding defense as a decoy as the dog gets older. Appropriately, it's a skill of the decoy to know when to add that defense to the training. So a lot of the work we do with the young dogs is lots of prey. The dog every time it's biting us is confident. We want to see those nice calm grips, and
Right.
as the dog confident in that, then we start adding defense to that very very slowly. And
Right.
it's not a thing where I'm the adversary of the dog early on in its training, especially with a young dog. I want them to feel confident. Let's build them up first.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. We have one more question. Opinion on late maturing dogs in sport or police work?
Yeah, I think we see that, especially that can be breed specific. I feel like German shepherds often mature a lot later than a Belgian Malinois. And
Yeah.
it does happen. Like some dogs just take a little bit longer to mature. Uh, I think that's a case by case thing, and people need to be patient with their dogs. I see a lot of people that the second they see something in their dog they don't like, they're selling the dog or moving on to the next dog. Sometimes there just needs to be some patience with the training. Dogs do mature differently, just like people do. So if you're not seeing something in your dog, you need to figure out, is it a drive issue? Is it an environmental issue? Like what's going on with the dog, or does it just need time to mature? And
Right.
I think patience goes a long way with dogs. I'm probably, you know, I'm probably pretty patient with my dogs. I'm going to let them mature. But also, a lot of things I do now, like especially with PSA, um, I'm not in a hurry to do anything. So
Right.
I'm on the dog's timeline as well as my own. I'm not trying to like have a PSA 3 on my dog before it turns 4 years old. I know some people are interested
Okay.
in that, but to me, I want the dog to mature, on its own timeline too.
Wow. Okay. So till 4 years, you will not do a PSA 2.
What's that?
You said you would not
I'm
do a
sorry.
PSA 2 till the dog is about 4 years, right?
Oh no, it's dependent on the dog. Like what I meant by that was I'm not in a rush to do things. You'll see a lot of people
Right.
that are trying to title their dog very quickly.
Right.
And getting back to the letting the dog mature thing is, I want to see the dog's maturity. The dog definitely changes over
Right.
time. So
Absolutely.
I'm more on the dog's timeline than my timeline. If
Right.
I'm seeing things in the dog that aren't there, I'm gonna let that dog mature and and work off the dog's timeline instead of mine.
Right. Right. Perfect. Okay. Answer, who does quite a lot of work in detection, he's asking puppy selection test, what age of the puppy? So I think he means that when do you do the puppy selection tests for pups?
If I'm buying a puppy, I'm interested in getting a puppy at 8 weeks old. So those tests are happening. I want to see the dog at 6 weeks, and then I want to see the dog multiple times until that 8 week period. And puppy selection's tough. Like I would love to say, oh, I can pick a puppy out of a litter, and that dog will be a PSA dog, or that will be a detection dog. You only know so much at 8 weeks. So there's some tests you can do, but I think you can start testing that dog at 6 weeks old,
Okay.
just to see how they're acting in different environments. But if I'm selecting a puppy, I want to see it multiple times, not just once. So there's some patience with that and scheduling and talking to the breeder and making sure you can get over there and see the puppies. If it's a good breeder too, you should be able to trust that breeder, have
Right.
a relationship with them. And when I selected Brew, I listened to what my breeder, who's Stacy Beller, I listened to what he was saying about that puppy, because
Okay.
he saw the dog all the time. And
Right.
I would say, hey, I like this dog for a certain reason, and he would confirm that or say, that's not really what's going on most of the time. Looks great today, but
Right.
that's not what's happening most of the time. So the breeders, if it's a good breeder, they're going to be honest with you about the dogs, and
Okay.
confirm what you're seeing. So that can happen at 6 weeks,
Right.
all the way up through 8. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Answer. I hope that helped. Sanya is asking, as a decoy, when working with a very new handler, what are the things you usually brief them on before you start bite work with their pup or dog for the very first time?
Hey, Sanya, how are you? I'm happy you're on here. Um, as a decoy working with a brand new handler, usually the biggest challenge for us is decoys are gonna laugh when they hear this because they're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. We're gonna tell the person to tell them to be a post, right? So what I mean by that is I want them to basically hold the dog still. All right. So the dog is at the end of a leash. I'm going to work the dog, but I don't want that dog coming towards me or going away from me or side to side unless I tell them to do that. So this sounds very, very simple, but one of the hardest things that people have, or
Absolutely.
one of the biggest challenges they have, is holding their dog still. So usually that comes with like a little lesson on how to hold the leash because they've got
Right.
a big 80-pound dog that is pulling them, and I want that dog to be still for me. So that's probably the biggest thing when we're working with someone new with bite work. Um,
Right.
on the decoy side of it, that's always it always makes me laugh. I'll say, stand still, and then within a few seconds, the dog's coming towards me. Stand still, right? Just be a post. So the decoys are probably
Uh,
laughing because we've all been there with new handlers, and that's okay. We understand too.
yeah, I've been yelled at a lot of times with by my decoys as well when I'm walking my
Yeah,
dog.
see,
Like, why are you
you know,
moving? Yeah, like even I
yeah.
move
Stop
an inch
moving.
and they're like, why are you moving? Yeah, I think we are always overstressed when we are
Yeah,
handling
for
for some
sure.
odd reason. Yeah.
I think handlers love seeing their dog work, and they forget what they're told, and they're just watching their dog, and they're saying, "Oh, this is amazing! Look at what my dog's doing," and they're moving around. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Uh, Now coming back to the sport dogs being pet dogs, that we started talking about. So, what role does a sport dog play, being a pet dog as well? Like, how different is it, or how is it generally? Since Brew is your
Um.
sport dog and she's also your pet dog, right? So, we would just
Yeah.
like
I
to
don't
know a
think
little
it's a.
bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we go to training or we do training, she knows it's time to go to training, and when we're home, she knows we're home. So she really does. It's something we talk about a lot with sport dogs or police dogs is having that off switch, to where
Right.
a dog can come home and you can come home from training and you turn the TV on and maybe you're getting something to eat and the dog is just a pet in the house. That's absolutely what I want from my dogs. I want them to be able to come home and just live with me normally. I don't want them to have to live in a kennel because they're aggressive or they can't ever turn off their switch and just chill and relax. So, I mean, that to me and most of my friends that I train with, dogs are exactly that. They're pets at home, and a lot of times if you came to visit my home, you wouldn't you know there's a Belgian Malinois there, but you wouldn't necessarily know that it's a dog that's trained in protection, because she's just going to be your friend. So that's what I want from my dogs at home. I know that's different for other people. I'm not saying that my way is the right way or that's the best way to go, but that's what I like.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And also, being a police officer for so long, we want to know a little bit about, so how do you keep the police dogs engaged post retirement?
Um, my first police dog, when he retired, he was 10 years old, so he was getting a little bit older. He was a German Shepherd, and for probably the first 6 months when I would go to work without him, he had a hard time with that because people don't realize this. Canine handlers, in the police world, spend 24 hours a day with their dog. That's more time than you're spending with your family because you're at home with the dog, but you're also going to work with the dog.
Right.
So I never really went anywhere without him, and he didn't really understand that. So that was hard. It was almost a little bit sad for me to leave, because I'd be putting on a uniform, and that was his key. When he would see me put a uniform on, he would know it's time to go to work. So for a while, that was a little bit hard. my wife could probably answer this question better than me, but I think it was after about 6 months, he
Okay.
finally kind of understood that, he wasn't going with me anymore. And it wasn't so much a sad thing. I think he almost enjoyed, just being able to relax and almost became more my wife's dog than my dog,
Okay.
because he was home and just hung out with her. So as
Right.
far as like engagement, even in
Yeah.
retirement, I would still hike with him. I'd still walk with
Oh,
him to keep him
nice.
healthy. So like you just, he stayed at the house and didn't do anything anymore. He still did things that were active. He just wasn't doing police training anymore. So that's a transition that I think a lot of handlers have to make. But it's not as sad as it sounds. Those dogs have worked hard. It's like us retiring. Sometimes we don't know how to stop doing a job, but uh, once we stop, we can kind of enjoy that time a little bit more.
Right. Right. Okay, wonderful. But you always did do some activity with him, so that's how he
Yeah,
stayed fine. Right.
yeah. I'm a believer in
Okay.
keeping them healthy and hiking with them. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think this question is more to do with his pet dog, if I'm not wrong. Prasad, if you can help us a little bit more. It is observed that the dog doesn't bark all the time whenever there is a new person at home, but sometimes he does. Why is it so? I'm guessing it's his pet dog. It's not very clear, but yeah.
So I'm a little confused on the question. The dog doesn't bark whenever there's a new person, but sometimes they do. So for me, I'm trying to figure out what exactly is being asked in the question. But if the dog is barking sometimes and sometimes it's not, answer that question without seeing the dog and seeing what's going on. But I typically don't really want my dog to bark at someone that comes into my house. My dog will bark on command if I give her an alert command, but I don't necessarily want the dog barking. So if you're trying to get the dog not to bark, that's a behavior thing. But if you want your dog to bark, I'm not exactly sure what the question is here, but
Yeah.
um,
He's saying
that
it's
that
regarding
that
a
could.
pet dog. Yeah.
Okay.
Prasad, do you want the dog to bark or you want the dog not to bark? What is the question exactly? Okay, until then, we'll move to the next one. If he comes back, we'll take that. Yes, Harshit. Currently, I don't have access to Decoy to work my dog. Is it okay to do bite work just with bite pillow or should I stop it? What dog do you have,
I
Harshit? Can
typically,
you
well,
tell us? Yeah, sorry. Do you want to know the details?
yeah, it depends. It depends on the dog and the level of training that the person has. I don't mind if people are doing, bite pillow or, work allowing the dog to grip a tug, or something like that. Um, there's plenty of decoys that work their own dog, but I think they have a skill level there and they understand what the dog's doing. I know when Brew was younger, I attempted some bite work with her by myself, and she wasn't okay with that context of me being the person that was bit. She
Um,
was. I saw a completely different dog with her. She was like, "You're my dad. I don't really like this."
oh shit.
So
Okay.
obviously, I stopped that right away. Where
Okay.
some people may not see that in the dog, and they keep doing it, and now it creates some nervous behavior on the bite. So that's again, we go back to the cliche. It depends on the dog. It does. It
Right.
also depends on the person's level of training. So I don't think it's a bad thing if the person knows what they're doing.
Right. Right. Okay. Sanya has another question. When raising your sport pup simultaneously as a pet, what age do you start introducing the off switch at home, or is it from the very day the dog comes home? Please don't say depends on the dog again.
Okay, we'll try not to. So with Brew, when we first got her as a puppy, there was obviously a lot of crate training that was going on because we were also working on housebreaking. So really, once the dog was housebroken, which probably was starting to get into that, 16-week time period, that's when we started to allow her to be more of a pet in the house.
Okay.
There's obviously still a lot of crate or kennel time, but really that started as soon as possible. It wasn't really an age thing for that. It was just when she was ready and could handle herself being loose in the
Right.
house. A Belgian Malinois puppy can be an absolute terror. in a household, just because of the way they are genetically. But like for her, it was around that 16-week mark where she was more of a member of the family and more of a pet at home. As opposed to just being crated and being the sport dog that was coming out of the crate for training.
Right. Okay. Sanya, hope that helps. Okay. So, no, speaking about India, we don't really have a dog sport culture. We just have PSA for the last few years, like you're aware of. And a lot of pet parents think that it's only for the experts, it's only for the trainers, although we have a few hobbies
Yeah.
who also participate in sports. Would you like to say something to the pet parents who are watching this? And also, does it really help make their relationship better with the dogs in any way? Participating in any
Yeah.
sport for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love PSA, and I think it's a great sport. I'm so happy that it's in India. But I would say
Right.
to people that have pets that want to do some type of sport or some type of work with their dog, it doesn't really matter what you do.
Right.
Do something with your dog. When I got Brew, I wanted to do PSA with her, but I told my breeder Stacy, I'd said, if it doesn't work out, if PSA doesn't work out for her, I'll do something else. I'll do dock diving with her. She was a
Nice.
member of my
Okay.
family, and I was going to do whatever was best for her. So it doesn't
Right.
have to be PSA. It doesn't have to be Schutzen. It doesn't have to be dock diving. It doesn't have to be scent work. But I think that anything you're doing with your dog is a positive thing. And there's,
Right.
for most dogs, you can find something that fits them. A lot of
Right.
people want to do PSA, and they may not have a dog that's capable of doing PSA. So
Mhm.
there's other things out there. I think that anything you're doing is going to help that relationship with the dog. They're going to be happier. Our dogs like
Right.
engagement with us. It makes
Right.
a healthier and happier dog, and it's fun. Go find something
Right.
fun to do with your dog. So I think that's good advice for any pet owner.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Can you tell us, Josh, a little bit about green dogs and to what level do you train them before you deploy them for different specific types of training?
So my experience with green dogs has been on the police side. We would
Okay.
typically buy a dog that we would refer to as a green dog, anywhere from that 14 month to 18-month old range, and we were usually getting those dogs in Europe. And when I say green dog, what we mean by that is the dog hasn't had any prior training.
Okay.
Now, what those dogs had was a lot of bite training, and that's all they'd had. They had no obedience. They had basically been built up by the Europeans for the first 14, 16, 18 months of life and just trained to bite. They had no out, no obedience at all. But to us, that was a green dog, and we would take that dog. We would select that dog based on what we saw on the dog, some of the tests we would do, and we would train that dog in a police school for about 12 to 14 weeks.
Okay.
People have different definitions of what a green dog is, and for us, at least for our purpose, that's what we referred to as a green dog. And
Okay.
that was that was pretty standard for us. We preferred to buy a green dog that we could train ourselves, as opposed to a dog that was pre-trained, and we may or may not know all the training history on the dog.
Right. Okay. And then before you deploy them for different departments or different specific tasks, so you would work a little bit on the obedience and then do that, or how is it?
So it was really everything at once. We were really flooding the dog with a lot of training, over a 12 to 14 week period. There was obedience, there was tracking, there was apprehension work, there was search work. Where a dog is going into a building to find a human, and then towards the end of the school we would add detection work. So it's a lot of work over a 12 to 14 week period. And after 12 to 14 weeks, that dog knows enough really to get itself in trouble. So that training continues on, obviously, through the life of the dog. And really, a
Right.
police dog, after it gets out of canine school, it's going to hit the streets, and hopefully, it's finding people and finding drugs and biting bad people and all that stuff. But that dog's really not going to be in its prime until it's been doing that for 2 or 3 years, and it's had more training, it's had more experience. You can compare that to a rookie police officer. A rookie police officer gets out of the police academy, knows just enough to get them in trouble, but it takes some experience too. So It's a long process, and it's a fun
Right.
process to train that, but it is a long process too.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so talking about the bite of a dog, we've heard that the dog's bite should be calm and full and hard at the same time. So, is there a order in which you train for this? A
I wouldn't
calm,
say
a
there's an
strong,
order.
and yeah.
I think Yeah, I think all at once. I mean, you want to see all that at once. So even with a puppy, if it's a puppy or a 12-month-old dog, if it's a dog that I've never worked before, usually the first bite that I give the dog is really for me, to get information on the dog, right? So the
Okay.
dog is biting me for the first time, and I'm getting information from the dog while it's biting me. I want to see, I want to see nice calm grips. If I'm seeing that, that's good, right? I want to
Okay.
see a nice full grip. That's good.
Okay.
I want the grip to be, hard and full and calm. If any of those things aren't happening, I'm going to work on that. You'll see some dogs go into some avoidance with a new decoy.
Right.
And a dog may bite fantastic with its training decoy all the time, and then it's introduced to a new decoy, and the dog is very nervy, right? So after that first bite, now I've got information on the dog, and it gives me a better picture of what I can do next to help that dog. So,
Right.
in a training environment, I think every time a dog bites me, I want that dog at the end of the session to be better than when it started.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that's my responsibility as a decoy. A lot of people look at a decoy and they say, "Oh, that's the person getting bit. They're there for my dog to bite." I don't care how good a trainer you are. When your
Right.
dog is biting the decoy, the decoy is the trainer, right? The
Right.
decoy is either
Absolutely.
helping your dog or hurting your dog. If it's not a good decoy, your dog is hurting. It's not getting better.
Absolutely.
So good decoys are really important. Especially your training decoys. If you have to have a good training decoy that understands the dog, understands the pictures that it's seeing. Getting back to your original question, there's not really a formula. It's what I'm seeing on the bite. I want to see
Right.
all those things that you described, and if I'm not seeing that, I'm going to do things dependent on the dog, to help it get through that. I want the dog
Right.
to feel confident on the bite.
Right. Absolutely. So that takes us to the next question that Sanya has asked. What would your advice be to someone who's looking for a training decoy for their dog? What qualities or achievements does a good training decoy need to have?
Um, so I think that resumes can often be, really overrated. Um, I would spend time with the decoy, before I selected them, but I would like to see them work dogs. I think that's probably, a better picture of what that decoy can do than maybe what's on the resume. There's plenty of people that have a great resume, and I wouldn't trust them with my dog because I've seen them work. And then there's
Right.
other people that are just starting out in dogs, or don't have that same resume, and they can really read a dog. They're really good at it. So I would I
Right.
would I would I would be going to training and maybe watching that decoy, listening to that decoy, watching them work other people's dogs.
Right.
Resume. I'm not saying that a resume doesn't help. It does. It's a good thing to see that and see what someone's accomplished. But I want to see what, as far as the resume, instead of things on paper, I want to see dogs that they've produced. Right. So what I mean by that is, if I went to a PSA club, it's actually one of the questions I ask when I go to an out of town trial. If
Okay.
I see a really nice dog, I usually ask people. I'll say, "Hey, who's that person trained with? Who's that dog's decoy?" Because the dog is
Right.
built really nicely, and it's a high level of training. So to me, that's information about a decoy, that
Right.
now I probably really respect, even more, than I did before. So I don't know
Right.
that it's so much about achievements. It's more about, what is this person doing with the dog?
Right.
Is there a history of building good dogs? Is there a history of success with these dogs? That's
Right.
something I'd look for in a training decoy.
Right.
Sonya, you've got a really
Absolutely.
good training decoy in Dev too. He's fantastic.
Right. Okay. Stacy's here. He's saying good day to all. Anvay, Chandra, all of them are saying hi to you, Josh.
Hey, how's it going?
So Mrugnaini, she has a Rottweiler who she's been working with. I don't know if the question is about her. It might be about another dog. How do you work with shy dogs?
So if a dog is shy, that's usually not ideal for PSA, but that's something we can work on as far as like the dog's confidence. So I think if a dog is shy, if I'm interpreting that properly in the training aspect of it, I'd want to increase the dog's confidence. So that could be an environmental thing. At
Right.
least for us, if we have a dog that is shy socially, I want to take that dog to a lot of places. I want that dog to see as much of the world as it can.
Right.
And if it's shy with people, I would want to introduce it to people. This is where having dog friends is a good thing.
Right.
Where dog friends are great because they're not afraid of the dog. They you can tell them, hey,
Right.
I've got a shy dog that I want to bring around you, and they're okay with it. They
Right.
they understand what you're doing. So I think with shy dogs, I think environmental exposures are a huge. It's going to help the dog maybe gain some confidence, and that could be a maturity thing. We were talking about maturity in the dog earlier. I don't know the age of the dog, but that's something that could get better in time, just naturally with the maturity of the dog as it ages.
Right. So you could work a shy dog for sports as well. I mean, if that is what she meant.
Possibly. I mean, possibly the dog can get through that. Typically for PSA, if a dog is shy, that's probably not something that is going to manifest very very well later. As the dog gets into the protection training, if the
Right.
dog is shy and not confident, that's probably going to happen on the field too. I'm not going to sit here and say any dog can do PSA because it's absolutely not true.
Right.
But
Right.
there might be something that dog can do, but it can
Right.
it can get
Makes sense.
better too with training. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So now, Rugnani, I hope that has helped. Now, talking about, I've seen you generally chill with the dogs you're working with. Yeah, the dogs who you have decoyed, I've seen you chilling with them after that. Although I have also seen a few decoys here who, for them, absolutely it's a no no if you chill with the dogs post work. So I've had decoys who've come, they've just told me, okay, this is what we are going to do with your dog. And they don't really want any interaction in front of the dog. Whereas some of them, which I've seen with you, there are a few dogs where you're nicely sitting with them even after work, kissing them. I've seen you doing all of that. Uh, is there any reason why you should or should not do it, or it doesn't really matter?
I won't speak to like other people's training because they have their methods, and if it works for them, that's great. At least for us, and you've seen it, I'm sure, in our club videos, and I think Koi does this too. But I like a dog that we go back to the off switch, right? So why is the dog biting? The dog's biting because we've told it to. There's some obedience there. And so why is the dog now not biting? Because we've told it it's not time to bite. So as far as like chilling with the dogs after training, I think it's good for the dogs. It helps them with their off switch. I
Thanks.
like doing that. And don't forget too that these are sport dogs. Our dogs are protection dogs for us. We don't just train PSA. We train home invasion type scenarios because we want our dogs to protect us at home or in a car. It's not always
Right.
just PSA training. But I don't think that's a bad thing, at least for me. I think it creates a nice balance for the dog. I don't want the dog to always look at me as a decoy, as an adversary.
Right.
Even when I'm doing bite work with the dog, I look at myself as more of a sparring partner. If
Right.
if someone's training for UFC or someone's a boxer, they have someone that they train with. The
Right.
person is not an adversary for the dog. They're a training partner, and I've seen this so many times, especially with Koi in our club, where the dogs are excited to see him because they're like, "That guy's cool. I get to train with him. I beat him up. I'm like, he's my sparring partner." So I think in the dog's mind, they look at us more, at least on the training decoy side of it. The dogs look at us as sparring partners. They look at us as their friends. They're excited to see us, and I don't mind having that relationship outside the suit too. I think it gives good balance to the dog.
Right.
We talked about the dog also being a pet. If a dog can bite someone and then it can turn that switch off and now chill with that person, I feel
Right.
pretty confident that that dog can also be a pet at home too.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely helps for that point as well. But have you seen decoys who do the other thing, that where they don't chill with the dogs? And do you have an opinion on it or not really? That
Sure.
why
I
would they
mean,
do that?
that's I don't. You have to ask them. That's not how I do things. But
Okay,
I think that they're doing that because in their mind the decoy is the bad guy,
right.
and you know the dog is maybe they're trying to bring something out in the dog. You know, and again, that's not how I do it. But I also won't sit here and badmouth other people's training theories or training philosophies. There's the the old saying of you know there's two people at the bottom of the mountain arguing on how to get to the top. Meanwhile, someone's actually getting to the top. There's a lot of ways to get to the top of the mountain.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's really nice. Okay. Now, talking about the bite, Josh, that we were just discussing the full bite. So, if a dog is not getting full on the bite, would you want to fight the dog a little harder, or does that run a risk in dropping the drive?
If a dog's not full on the bite, I need to know why. Is the dog not full just because it needs grip work, or is the dog not full because it's nervous about being there? So it depends on why. I need to know why the dog isn't full in the grip, and that's going to
Okay.
be seen when we work the dog. So I went back to what I was talking about earlier. If it's a new dog, that first bite that it gives me is going to give me a lot of information. So if the dog is not full and it's not all the way in on the grip and maybe it's pulling away from me and I can see that the dog is nervous about being there, that's definitely not a dog that I want to put more fight on. I want that dog to feel a little bit more comfortable about being there. And you'll see that
Okay.
dog, if that dog is nervous with the decoy, you'll see that if that decoy can make that dog feel comfortable, that dog is more likely to push in. Now, if it's a
Right.
grip issue, again, I'm probably not going to fight the dog more. What I would do is have the dog on a long line to where it can maybe barely get the grip, and if it lets go, it's going to lose the grip, right? So that's going to encourage a dog to get a full grip from the get go. Um,
Nice.
so
Okay.
it depends. It depends on why the dog is shallow in the grips. There's a lot of different things we can do to help that out.
Right.
But the bigger issue is why is the dog shallow? Is it a grip thing? Is it a confidence thing?
Right.
This goes back to the good training decoy. The good training decoy can tell you why that dog is like that.
Right. 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 Okay. So probably, if at all they are trying to fight the dog harder and it's not helping, then maybe you have to also observe and check for something else. That what is
Yeah,
really
sure.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Anwar is saying I want to pet the dogs, but I'm not allowed to during trials.
Hey, I got the same problem, man. Like, I always want to pet the dogs. I like seeing the dogs out there and seeing them working with their handlers, and you want to hang out with all of them. But yeah, trial work's a little bit different. Don't pet the dogs at trial; you get in trouble.
Right. Okay. Now, Josh, for the leg bites, do you generally put the dogs on the left leg for the leg bites, or do you also put them on the right leg? And also, another question is that are we allowed to tell during the trial, before the trial, that okay, your dog is on the right or on the left, or they are always on the left?
Okay, so let's talk about the trial thing first. At a trial, please do tell your decoys that your dog bites in the leg. We need to do that. And then tell us if your dog targets a specific leg. Tell us which one.
Okay.
So at a trial, if I'm decoying, I usually I usually go through the handler meetings also. So during the
Okay.
handler meeting, I usually ask all the handlers, where does your dog target? That way I know where the dog, where its, primary target is going to be. As far
Right.
as training, I think that if you want a leg dog for PSA, I would recommend doing a left leg dog. The reason I say that is most dogs in PSA are going to be left bicep dogs. That's where their primary target's going to be. So for decoy safety, for dog safety, if you're going to do a leg targeting dog in PSA, I would definitely do a left leg dog because the motion for the decoy isn't going to change that much. It's going to be a natural
Okay.
motion for the dog. Now,
Okay.
it doesn't matter where you teach your dog to bite. You can teach your dog to bite right side if you want to. That's okay.
Okay.
I did a trial in Austin last year, and the dog bit right bicep. So for the courage
Okay.
test, everything was backwards for me, which was difficult for me as a decoy. But that's
Right.
okay. The dog bit great in the right bicep. We
Right.
don't you don't have to have your dog target a certain place. But I would
Okay.
recommend a left leg targeting dog. For our dogs are upper body dogs, so we teach the left bicep for PSA. As the dogs get older, and we start preparing for the fended scenarios where we're going to basically block them from the upper body.
Right.
Um, we teach them to take whatever leg they can get to.
Okay.
So when we're teaching that as a secondary bite area, we're not really teaching, hey, go find the left leg. We're just teaching them to go find a leg because your
Leg.
primary target's been taken away. So go get whatever leg is available.
Right. Okay. And talking of primary target, is there any advantage of choosing a leg over a bicep or the other way around?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think people would argue that back and forth for a long time. I would say I've always liked an upper body arm biting dog. I will say as a decoy, it's harder, at least for PSA, it's harder to drive a leg dog. So if the dog is biting me on the leg, especially if it's a big, heavy dog, my drive probably won't be as powerful with a leg dog. Now, here's where I do have an advantage on a leg dog as a decoy. You can really rain down a very hard stick hit if a dog is on your leg, because if a dog's
Right.
on my leg, both my arms are free, and I can really bring down a hard hit. So you can argue back and forth which one's better, the leg bite or the arm bite. I prefer the arm bite in a secondary. But some dogs also benefit from a leg bite. I've seen dogs that maybe biting here on the left bicep because they're so close, and they're in the core of the decoy, and they're in the core of the man. Sometimes that's made them nervous, and when that
Okay.
dog has been moved to the leg, they're a completely different dog. They're very confident because they're further away from the core of the man. So
Right.
sometimes it might be a good idea to let the dog tell you where it needs to target. So it depends on the dog.
Right. Right. And is it maybe for the smaller dogs probably a leg bite works better? Otherwise, they're going to be flinging them around on the arm, or not really?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's an argument for that. If we're working a really small dog, that leg might be a better option.
Okay.
I also love seeing a smaller dog that just flies through the air, and jumps on you like a spider monkey and just eats you up. Um, there's a
Right.
there's a guy there's a guy in Derek Rose's club. His name's Jared. He's a fantastic decoy, but he has a level 2 dog, um,
Okay.
and that it's a female. That female only probably weighs like 40-45 pounds at the most, and she targets upper body. And when she bit me in
Wow.
trial, when I was driving her, I'm basically carrying her in the drive, like her feet are not on the ground. And I just thought
Yeah.
that was the coolest thing because she was there and she was 100% committed to being there. She's a
Okay.
great dog, but that's a small dog that bit up her body and is fantastic at it. So
Right. Okay. Great. Now about locked in prey behavior, we see a lot of dogs who are locked in prey. So is could that be a problem, and how does one handle that?
yeah, my dog was like this early on. She would just get in prey lock and wouldn't bark. That was a maturity thing for her, and
Okay.
it was really, I can credit our training decoys, Koi, knowing how and when to bring that out, and adding some defense to the picture to where she was like, whoa, this is a little bit more serious, and she's going to bark. I don't necessarily mind when a dog prey locks. I just want to make sure that dog is clear enough to be able to come out of that when it needs to. And what I mean by that
Okay.
is, if a dog locks up in prey, is the dog have enough of a clear mind to where I can bring the dog out of that and maybe go back into some obedience.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. And I
Okay.
think that, that at, you see that a lot with younger dogs. The dog
Right.
locks up in prey. We can we can add some defense to that. You know, we can drive channel and bring out some defense in that dog. You know, to get it out of that. That can be tricky. It needs to be done, you know, properly with an experienced decoy that knows when to bring that out and at what level. And Koi is
Right.
fantastic at that at club. But I keep talking about Koi because Koi is obviously my primary decoy from my dog. So
Right.
anything that my dog does that my dog is successful at is because of Koi.
Right. Absolutely. I hope Koi is listening, or he will later. uh,
He's asleep. I guarantee he's asleep.
okay. Okay. Now, on the other hand, Josh, there are certain dogs who work more in defense. Now, could that be a problem? And how do you? What would your approach be to work in a much more balanced drive?
Yeah. You know, there's always two sides to that. You've got your prey monsters and you've got your dogs that are, you know, just,
Extremely defensive.
you know, extremely defensive. Exactly. I think the decoy needs to bring out some more prey in that, you know, especially for PSA. I think that almost always, and I hate to use blanket statements, but almost always these dogs in PSA that are extremely defensive, you very rarely see in the upper levels. And that's because those dogs are taking things so seriously.
Right.
And when we start putting a lot of pressure on a dog, you'll see that those dogs oftentimes won't out. They're going to they think they're in the fight of their life all the time. And you know, by the second or third scenario they've done, they're like, I'm out here on this field and these decoys are trying to kill me. They won't out. So I haven't seen, you know, this is just my experience. I haven't seen a lot of dogs that are very prey heavy be very successful in the upper levels of PSA. It doesn't mean they can't, you know, do a PDC or, you know, level one, but I'd love to see it if someone could do it. But I think that I definitely prefer a prey heavy dog. I
Right.
want some dog, obviously, but I definitely prefer a prey heavy dog. You know, both for police work and for PSA.
Okay. Okay. Wow. I think that kind of is her question, Sanya's question regarding PSA. What kind of a dog would you say may be an ideal candidate for the sport? I think this is what you said,
Yeah.
or
So
anything else? Yeah.
yeah, prey heavy, but I think for PSA, I think you know, a dog that is very stable environmentally. We,
Okay.
especially in the upper levels, they see so many different scenarios. Well, level three
Yeah.
is 100% surprise. We all know that. So a dog that has great environmentals and you know is stable in different environments, I think that
Right.
that's huge for PSA. It's huge for a
Right.
police
Right.
dog too. But that's something that I want to see as that would make the dog an ideal candidate for me for PSA is its stability in different environments.
Right. Okay. Now, Josh, how does one work on the stress when the dog is on the bite? So, by stress, I mean probably the dog is on the bite and he's growling or he's shifting on the bite. So, how should one
Yeah.
work on that?
Again, this is the decoy. Like the decoy is training the dog when this is happening. If the dog is growling generally tells me the dog isn't comfortable. But some dogs are just loud. Like there's
Yeah.
some dogs that are extremely. Every picture I'm seeing from the dog is telling me the dog's confident, but it's growling a little bit. You know, like that to
Yeah.
me. That's that dog. Like that dog's a little bit different. They're
Yeah.
not all going to fit in the box that we put them in. But as
Right.
far as working the dog, if the dog is not comfortable, um,
Right.
I'm definitely not. I'm gonna like back way off on any kind of you know, defense or anything. I'm not gonna do any of that with the dog. I want that dog to beat me up.
Right.
So that's when I basically become the wimp in the suit, where I'm gonna let that dog
Right.
I'm gonna let the dog push me around. I'm gonna really react to everything that it's doing to make that dog feel more confident, right? So if the
Right.
dog is growling, shifting in the grip, the dog's like pulling away from me, I'm definitely gonna you know, make that dog feel more powerful. And
Right.
that can happen quickly. Some dogs are like they get it pretty quick, and some dogs takes a little bit longer. You'll see that with dogs that are on new decoys. You know,
Right.
they're comfortable and confident with their normal decoy, and then another decoy shows up, and you start to see some of that nervousness on the bite. So, in training, we want to you know, build the dog up and make the dog feel a little bit more powerful and stronger.
Right. Right. Harshit has a question again. What are the common mistakes done by the decoy that end up causing an injury to the dog?
As far as injuries, I think the biggest thing that most handlers fear is the dog being jammed on the bite. So I think it's important for decoys to make sure they're absorbing or letting the dog flow through the bite. In PSA, we do the courage test, where we're running at the dog full speed and the dog is running at us full speed. That could theoretically be a recipe for disaster when two mammals are running at each other as fast as they can, and then they collide in the air. So there's a lot of responsibility on the decoy's part to keep the dog safe and return the dog to the handler in the same condition as the dog was sent. Um, Probably the most common mistake by decoys is what we would call jamming the dog. So that's where the dog bites us in the bicep, and instead of allowing the dog to flow through, we've basically like pushed into the dog when it's biting. So that can cause some neck injuries, some back injuries. That's I don't want to say it's common. I don't know that it's that common, but those are things that can happen when you're decoying, that we need to be aware of. So safety of the dog. I've always said this when it comes to decoying. We worry about our own personal safety. I mean, a dog is biting us, so like we're in a certain amount of danger when that's happening. But we also need to make sure and put it very high on our list that we keep the dog safe. Um,
Absolutely.
Teeth can be a big thing. If people are swinging the dog a lot, in training, there could be teeth issues. As far as I've seen teeth pop out on bites, which is horrible,
Right.
but it does happen. So, maybe limit some of that and put the safety of the dog first.
Right. Right. Okay. Right. Harshit, I hope that helps. Yeah. In case, Josh, someone does not have access to a decoy, how much of it can they work on their own? And will it still be as effective? Or probably if they have a family member, wear up the suit or the sleeve and give a bite, is that okay or does that run a risk?
I wouldn't. I would not be asking a family member to work my dog unless the family member was a decoy. Um,
Okay.
I just don't think that that's going to be a good picture for the dog as far as training. Not saying remove the family dynamic away from it. For
Okay.
instance, if my wife had a sports dog, I would absolutely work her dog. I
Of
think
course.
that dog, I want that dog to have an off switch, but it's more about the level of training the decoy has. I don't think it's smart to go home and say, oh, hey, put this sleeve on. I don't have a decoy. Put this sleeve on. Let's do some bite work. The person with the sleeve is training the dog at that point. And we talked earlier about, you're either training the dog well or you're training the dog poorly. That's probably going to be poor training for the dog, and it's going to be something that a skilled decoy is going to have to fix later. So I would not recommend that. And it's not so much about it being a family member; it's more about the level of skill and the level of training that the decoy has.
Right. Right. Okay. And can one do it on their own? Can they learn it or can they do it on their own as well? Or it is not that effective? You rather have a decoy work with you?
I'd rather have a decoy work always, and I understand that some people don't have access to decoys. I'm just blessed in that I have a lot of decoys that I can work with around here, and they're really good decoys. I understand that people don't have a club that they can go to. Or there's people that drive 4 or 5 hours one way around here just to work with a decoy.
Right.
I would say that if you're serious about getting into bite sports, no matter what sport it is, French ring, Mondio, PSA, Shih Tzu, whatever it is,
Yeah.
if you're committed to doing that sport, you need to go seek out those decoys, and have them work your dog. I, I, I don't have a problem with a decoy working their own dog. I think that I don't think that that's a bad thing, depending on the dog again. But I wouldn't be doing that instead of finding a decoy. I'd much rather have a decoy work my dog than be working my own dog or trying to have a family member work the dog. That's more so on the bite side of things.
Right. Right. Okay. Now, talking of the club culture, you guys seem to have a really nice one. We keep seeing a lot of
Yeah,
videos, pictures of the kind of
yeah,
fun you guys have, even in between different clubs, not only in your club. So, what advice would you
yeah,
like to give all the trainers, all of us in India, so that we can coexist, and train, work together, at least even if
yeah.
it's with different ideologies?
Yep. So I'm not going to sit here and act like everyone in Texas loves each other. We don't. We don't all love each other. But I think that one of the things that can really help the sport and the clubs is understanding that sometimes we have to put aside personal differences to help the sport grow or to help each other grow. And I think that that's like that to me that's a personal thing. I want to see people succeed. We can all succeed. Why would I be jealous because someone else, I don't know, got a level 1 on their dog before I did? That shouldn't make me jealous. That should make me happy for them, right? That's a personal thing on my part. You know, I think that as far as the clubs, I think it's really important that clubs get together and train. If you can do that, have a training day. We do that when we're preparing for trial. We'll seek out another club because our dogs have seen our decoys for the last six
Right.
months, but they need to see a different decoy. So we'll
Absolutely.
invite a club to come train with us, or we'll go train with another club so that we
Wow.
can better prepare our dogs for trial. That's important.
Wow.
It helps your training, it helps the other club's training, and it helps the sport as a whole. So in India, you have clubs all over. You have clubs in Delhi. There's clubs in Pune. There's clubs all over a very large country. So that's a great thing for the sport. If you really want to take PSA to the next level in India, it'd be great if the clubs were open to having each other, working with each other, sharing information, sharing decoys, having training days, and really just being supportive of each other. If someone from another club does well, we should celebrate that. That's
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
to me that's
Absolutely.
that's how the sports grow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope all of us have taken this advice very seriously. Okay, Prathamesh has a question. I have been trying to catch a dog on bicep for some time now, and it keeps punching me with her legs in the stomach before biting in the bicep. I have stood behind a car with my bicep out, still the dog punched the car before hitting the bicep. I have also tried to give bite in the tricep, still no success. Any advice?
I don't really have a huge problem with that. Like those dogs suck to decoy. Like they beat you up. They bite you in the bicep, and their whole body flows into your chest. I think some of that's genetic. I've seen
Okay.
pictures of like bloodlines of certain dogs, and you'll see it genetically in the dog to where that's how the dog targets and that's how the dog launches and flows through the bite. Um, Unless there's a reason that you want to change that, I wouldn't change it. That's how the dog bites. Like that's not so much of a bad thing. I think it's cool, and most of the time when a dog is comfortable in this part of the decoy, right? So if the dog is comfortable in the core of the decoy, that dog is probably a pretty confident dog. And that's me without seeing the dog, but I like it when a dog is very, very comfortable in the core. I don't necessarily like taking a courage test with a dog that does that because it hurts. But I think
Right.
that those are usually really nice dogs, the ones that are biting more here instead of trying to come to the outside. Yeah, I like that. I don't know that I want to change it.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. Richard is asking, how does one become a PSA Nationals decoy?
I don't know, Richard. I don't know. I don't know. I think that anything with PSA, um, or even really in life, like just do something. Just be passionate about what you're doing, and then things happen. Like become a student of what you're doing. Be passionate about it. Learn as much as you can. Do as much as you can. That's something to think about too with PSA. Is it's not an organization where people are making money from say we're doing it because we love it. So if you're passionate about it and you're doing things for the organization, you're a student of it. You're trying to make things better for everyone. I think good things are going to happen to you. I don't know that there's a recipe for how to become a nationals decoy or even how to become a PSA decoy. There's some skill in that, of course, but I think that, just be passionate about what you're doing and do it well, and good things will happen.
Right. Okay. So Adnan, he's not here right now, but he had asked me this, and he asked me to ask you this rather, is that what exercises do we do to prepare for to become a trial decoy? And can you design a PSA decoy exercise regime so that people can even buy it off you?
I'm not. I love the question. It's a great question. I definitely not sell anything like that. Like that's information that I would share with anyone that wanted to know it. I think that as far as like the technical side of becoming a PSA decoy, and this would be the same for any sport. You need to learn the mechanics. So
Okay.
you need to learn how to catch the dog properly for the sport. You need to learn
Right.
scenarios, how those work. As far as physically preparing, one of the things that I think that decoys need to do, and I do this when I have a trial coming up, is we need to be strong. So there's going to be weight training involved, but the legs are so important to decoying. And people don't really realize that because we get bit in the upper body mostly. I think we need to have strong arms and strong shoulders and chest, which we do. We need to be strong there. But if you're working a very large trial, a trial that has 25 dogs in it, which is the max, and you have 25 dogs on Saturday and 25 dogs on Sunday,
Wow.
by Sunday evening, your legs are going to be extremely tired. You're going to be very, very sore in your legs. So I always tell decoys, running, and I hate running. My daughter loves running. I hate running, but there's
Right.
no substitute to running and getting your legs in shape for trial work.
Okay.
You need to work out, but definitely, really focus on your legs. Your legs are so important to decoying, and those will be the first things that'll get really tired and affect your decoying, as the day goes on.
Right. I will let Adnan know this.
Yeah.
Okay, Chandra is asking. Okay, there was a typo. He said, we do have a club in Hyderabad. I have been trying to encourage people coming to train in the club. Unfortunately, everything is in vain. What's your suggestion on this? So there are rarely people in
Chandra,
Hyderabad for him to work with. Yeah.
okay. Chandra, we have a saying in America, and we say, if you build it, they'll come. And you're a fantastic dog trainer. You do an excellent job with your dogs. I watch your videos. I've met you in person. You're a great trainer. Keep doing good work. Keep showing the good work, and people will want to come and see that. They'll want to come work with it.
Absolutely.
So be patient with that, and just keep being great at what you're doing, because you've got it. You're doing good. Um, and hopefully that'll change in the near future. But I think when people see good work, they want to be part of that. So keep it up. That's all I can say to that.
Right. So Chandra, just keep going. Okay.
Yeah.
Now talking of genetics, Josh, that we all have heard that genetics do matter for bite work, right? To bring the right dog in for your sport. But unfortunately,
Sure.
in India, being a developing sports culture, we don't always have the luxury, to have these kind of dogs.
Yeah.
Sometimes we cannot buy, this kind of a dog. So, what do you say to these people? Then, should we not dream of doing bite work, or is there still a way to do it without hurting the soul of the dog?
Yeah, it goes back to finding something. If you have a dog and you're committed to having that dog as your pet, that dog is part of your family, and that's not going to change. Then find something that your dog can do. And it
Okay.
may not be PSA. I want everyone to do PSA. I love PSA. I hope PSA grows in India. I hope it grows worldwide because it's fun. But it's not right for every dog.
Right.
If you're serious about doing PSA, I would definitely go seek out a dog that's capable of doing PSA if you really want to do the sport.
Right.
But it's not for everyone. It's not for every dog. There's a lot of commitment. There's resources you need. You need decoys. You need to
Yes.
have knowledge of the sport. So there's a lot that's going on with that. But I am a believer in, because I'm that person. I'm that person where if my dog isn't suitable for play, I'm going to find something else for her to do, because I care more about the dog than I do a sport or a title or winning trophies. My dog is part of my family. So if my dog didn't bite, she'd be dock diving. She'd be doing something fun that she enjoyed. So You talked about ruining the soul of the dog. Let's not ever ruin the soul of the dog. Let's allow that dog to do something that it's capable of, and we can have fun with, and just enjoy that time with your dog.
Right, absolutely. Okay. On a lighter question, what is your favorite scenario in the sport?
I love PSA 3 because it's exciting. It's new. So when you've worked a lot of trials, the scenarios where we do the same thing, those are always the same. So level 3 is very exciting. I love doing I anything in the threes is great. As far as the scenarios that are scripted, probably my favorite scenario is what's called the dual attack, and that's in
Okay.
level 2. And the reason I like that scenario is you're actually working with another decoy. There's 2 decoys on the field. We both courage test the dog. One of us is going to get bit twice, and the other one's going to get bit once. So you're guaranteed you're going to get bit. That's a great thing for a decoy. We like getting bit, and I like it because
Absolutely.
it takes some teamwork with the other decoy.
Right.
And I look back at trials that I've done, and working those scenarios with other like really great decoys that I look up to. Those are things I remember at the trial. I love catching a really nice dog, but I also love working with really great decoys. And we've got so many of them over here. There's so many great decoys in PSA. It's fun to do
Right.
that scenario with a great decoy. I always remember that. So I like the dual attack.
Right. Okay, great. Now, talking about scenarios, during the carjacking scenario while you were here, you managed to fail a lot of our dogs. Yes. So, what do you think we missed working on? I'm sure all of us, they were all working hard. But what is it
Yeah,
like that we did miss working on?
I have to talk about that for a minute. So that was the beginning of bitework in Pune, and it wasn't going so well for the dogs. And I was really nervous that no one was going to feed me dinner that night because they're going to all be mad at me. So that I remember that, and
Yeah.
so I think that the thing with that was, and I tell a lot of clubs this: trial decoys for a reason. And I think that PSA trial decoys, you don't just get to show up to a PSA camp and become a trial decoy. When Sean selects people for trial work, there's things he's looking for, and intensity, power, and speed are all part of those things. And I'm not saying that at that trial I brought more of that than the regular trained decoys did. I'm not saying that, but maybe I brought that power in a different way the dog hadn't seen before. So this is
Right.
where I go back to, when you're preparing for a trial with your dog, you want your dog to see as many decoys as it can. You
Right.
want your dog to see different decoys. Even with
Correct.
my dog, like Koi Fam is a fantastic decoy. He can bring intensity and power and speed and all that, but he's my dog's primary decoy. If I'm in a trial, I want to see my dog on another decoy.
Right.
So I think that it was probably less about me and more about the dogs seeing someone new, right?
Right.
So I think different exposures for the dogs are a big thing, and that's the PDC courage, or not the PDC courage, the PDC carjacking scenario. That's the very first bite. I think something that I saw too. I see this a lot in the PDC carjacking is the dog gets in the car and isn't really focused on the decoy. The dog gets in the car. It's like, oh, we're going for a ride, right? And then all of a sudden, now I'm in the window, and the dog's like, oh my gosh, like this guy's coming through the window. So there's like some surprise. Well, if you're training the scenario properly, when the dog gets in the car and you can focus the dog on the decoy, the dog is like, all right, I know what's happening. We're about to do a bite here.
Okay.
So you definitely don't want your dog to be surprised in that scenario, but definitely showing that picture using other decoys is definitely going to help.
Okay, that's a great advice. Yeah. Dave has a question, Josh. Hey,
Hey,
Josh,
Dave.
if one has a dog and is beginning in PSA and seems to be doing great, is there any way to evaluate if the dog is capable of doing higher levels, or is there any way to evaluate if the dog is capable of doing a PSA 3? Because we keep hearing that not even all good dogs are capable of reaching a PSA 3.
So that's a good question, and really, I think the better. I don't have a dog that's on that level yet. I hope I get there someday. But if you talk to judges and if you talk to people that have been successful in PSA, I think most of them will tell you that if you can get a level 1 with your dog, then your dog has been tested to a certain level. So we have this saying in PSA: level 1 is a test of the dog, level 2 is a test of the trainer, and level 3 is a test of the team.
Team.
All right,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's teamwork. So if you're able to achieve a level 1, and you've done I don't know, the attack on Handler scenario with Sean Siggins, and your dog is able to withstand that kind of pressure, you can probably withstand the pressure that's going to happen in level 3. Level 3 is a little bit different because we add in some environmental scenarios where the dog might get a blast of water in the face. So if the dog is able to do like a level 1, and it is also really, really stable
Right.
environmentally, meaning it can handle mechanical pressure, it can handle a chainsaw, a vacuum cleaner, water, if it can handle those environmental things, I would say that if the dog and the trainer are committed to the training, and barring injury and age and all those things, it can get to that level if you can put a 1 on the dog. So really in level 2, I don't really feel like there's anything as far as pressure on the dog that it couldn't handle in 1. It's just a higher level of training, and then getting on the field in the 3s is the same. It's just more training. But I think
Right.
level 1 is a great test of the dog, and we hear that
Right.
all the time in PSA. So I think that if you're getting a 1 on your dog with good training and good sound environmentals, you can be on the field in the 3s.
Right. Okay. And now we have two legs for the one, right?
Yeah, it's a little longer. Yeah.
Okay. Chandra has one more question. He had said earlier that your whatever you said was motivating also. And now he's asking how or what do we prepare me and my dog for PSA 2? What to keep as important notes?
Um, I'll go back to something that Koi is big on in our club, and we typically don't trial in our club until we're very, very ready for trial. And that's hard for you guys because you might only have one trial a year in India, and you might have to travel, 20 hours on a train to get to that trial. I know that that's very hard. So this is easier for me to say than it is for you guys to apply, but make sure you're almost beyond the level that you're trialing at. And if you're going to trial in the 2s, all those level 2 pitchers, the transport, the guards, all that stuff should be very, very solid. Like right now with Brew, I'm training her for the 2s, and she's pieced together most of the elements of level 2. And I know that there's people that would say, "Oh, go trial her," but I want it to be I want it to be really good when she shows in the 2s. So keep the foundational stuff going. Like when you're preparing for 2, the transport's a big deal. Make that transport really, really solid. Don't just get to the point where your dog can do it. Get to the point where it can do it really, really well.
Very
And I would even say, like the level 2 transport, you're with your dog. In level 3, we're going to have a remote transport where the dog is transporting by itself. Well, when I trial, I would hope that my dog is at the point where I can really do almost a remote transport with my dog before I trial in level 2. So even our level 3 dogs, we have a saying in our club. We say, "Hey, we're training for PSA 4." Well, there's no PSA 4. It doesn't exist. But it's a mindset in that we're going to show our dogs in training more than they're actually going to see in trial. I hope that helps, Chandra.
absolutely. Stacy saying directionals.
Yeah. Directionals are huge. They're huge. Remote directionals. That's hard. That's a tough thing. But I'm glad Stacy said that. Showing some of those training pictures that, like, we train directional type stuff with our puppies. They don't have to do a directional until at least level 2. So we're already preparing them and showing them pictures that they'll see later down the road when they don't even have a PDC. So we're not really
Right.
training for the level that we're at. We're training beyond that all the time.
Wow. Okay. Oh, you show them these pictures as a puppy. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Now, not necessarily the puppy or the scenarios where they're getting blasted with water in the face. We're not doing that with puppies, but
Right.
we are training like some of the foundational elements, especially on the a directional really is obedience. You're
Right.
directing your dog to a certain way. Those things we're definitely showing them as puppies, so it's not a new thing that we're teaching once they get their one.
Nice. Nice. Great. So, Josh, we've anyway crossed the hour, but I still have a last question for you. So
Okay.
you being the secretary of decoys of PSA, yeah. So what do you? And it's been an honor that all of us have shared the field with you once, like the last year for the trial. So what are the things that you observe in the handler, and what are the things that you spot in the dog? Like what are the weaknesses that you spot when you see the dogs enter the field, or what are the things that you just see and you know that you can exploit these during the trial?
So as a decoy, I don't want to say that I look at a team and look for something to exploit, because one of the things we do as trial decoys is we need to be fair and consistent. And so what that means is on the trial field, if I do a courage test with one dog, I can't look at the next dog and say, "Oh, I think I could do this with that dog." It needs to be the exact same as I just did with the last dog. So
Right.
in a trial setting, I'm not really trying to exploit anything that I see in a team. Now level 3 might change a little bit. I might see that maybe the dog is like not really paying attention to their handler, like they've lost some focus. If a dog has lost the focus, I might try and gain that dog's focus as a decoy. But that's more level 3 specific, because that's a different ball game. But as far as normal trial work, I'm not really doing anything different, depending on what I see. I do like to talk to competitors after the trial and say,
Okay.
"Hey, I saw this in your dog. This is maybe something you could work on." If they want to have that conversation. But I'm definitely not trying to exploit anything in trial just because I see a certain team do something.
Okay, but what are the things that you're observing when you do see a dog and a handler? Like, are you spotting? Are
Yeah.
you looking
So
for a few things? Yeah.
one of the things where I know as a decoy, especially like during level 2 or level 3 obedience, or even really level 1 obedience, is when a handler comes on the field and the dog is 100% engaged in the handler. The nice focus heel, doesn't really care about what's going on around them. They're engaged with the handler. When I see that, I'm like, there's nothing I can do with this dog. Even in level 2 or level 3, when we're distracting the dog, if the dog's engaged with the handler, I don't know that I'm going to get anything out of the dog. The dog's doing what it's supposed to do. Now, when the dog starts coming out of the heel and
Checking.
like looking at the decoys, when they start checking the decoys, I'm like, I got you. All right, I got you now. Give me another minute, and you're gonna be biting me. Right. So, I guess that like mentally, that's something that I see in the dogs. But if we can get the engagement from the dog instead of the dog being engaged with the handler, that's something I see a lot at trial where people fail. And this goes back to the dogs being around different decoys too. A
Right.
dog sees a new decoy and they're like, that guy looks fun. Like, I want to bite him. I haven't bit him before. Or the flip side of this, and Stacy's watching this. I think I can't see who's watching it, but Stacy will
Yeah.
tell you this. Stacy's been on the field in level 3, and Tuco sees me. Like, I'm his buddy, I'm his sparring partner. He's like, "There's Josh. I didn't know Josh was here. Like, I get to
Oh
bite
my
Josh.
God.
Josh is my friend." So
Wow.
Tuco, in my opinion, is probably more likely to bite me because he's bitten me so many times.
Right.
So that's happened at trial, and Stacy can talk about that. But yeah, there's lots of different aspects to what we see at trial and what happens. But I think if you can, as a handler, if you can keep your dog engaged on you, and have that
Right.
neutrality to decoys, that's really going to help you progress in PSA.
Right. So the same applies even for the PDC, like what happened the last year and all of those
Absolutely.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Great. Great. I think we've taken most of the questions, so that's great, Josh. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much
It's
for having me. It's an
really,
honor to have you guys.
yeah, it's really been an honor to have you on board, and all of us in India love you, like you know. For people
I
who
love you
are in
guys. You guys
Texas,
are amazing.
for people who are in Texas, please get in touch with Josh and Kirby K9 for any of your protection work requirements, or even amazing, amazing collars and accessories that he makes. Yeah, so Josh, do you
Priyanka, thanks
have?
for having me on. Yeah, I just want to thank you for having me on. I want to encourage everyone in India to keep training hard. You guys have a really good thing going on. When Jonathan Katz and I were there last year, we both agreed that the trial we had in Pune, it like a U.S. trial. Like we've been to trials that were just like that. You guys are doing great work. I hope it keeps growing. And you guys are successful in that. And I hope I get to come visit you guys soon.
We hope to. Great. Thank you everyone for watching and for asking all your questions. I hope we've done a fair job in answering them. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you.